encourages you. On Tuesday night, we had our ministry team leaders meeting at our place, and one of the things we often do at our ministry team leaders is we shove people on the hot seat, and we have time where we pray for them, and we have different pictures or words or prophecies for people while they're sitting in the hot seat. And Shelley had a little picture. It was a picture of, if I'm right here, a picture. This is while I was in the hot seat. They were praying for me. They had this picture of a child with clothes on, and a teenager with clothes on, and an adult with clothes on. And it's like God was saying, actually, you've got to have different clothes. You change clothes as you get older. You know, different stages. You've got different sized clothes, and they look different, and all the rest of it. So you change clothes. And it was like God was saying, that's what's happening with the church. You know, I felt really encouraged by that, actually, because I guess I've been struggling with the whole thing that church is growing, and it's like we've got different structures and different forms and so forth. And I've been struggling with that. I'm trying to get my head around it, you know, and I think, God, I think this is getting too big for me, you know, sort of struggling with the thing about it. And I actually felt really encouraged by that. It's like God said, actually, I know, Maurice, exactly what's going on. It's all right. You know? And it's amazing how just a simple thing like that can just settle your heart down or encourage you, and you go away saying, oh, God, it's great that you know what's going on. You know, and it's really good. And so that's what prophecy does. It encourages us. Just a little word or a picture, and it just settles your heart down or encourages, and you say, oh, thank you, Lord, for that. That's really neat. Fifthly, in verse 32 it states, the spirits of the prophets are subject to the control of the prophets. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. In other words, no one has to prophesy. People who prophesy are not out of control. If they are out of control and feel that they have to prophesy, then you need to seriously question whether that's from God or not. I had an example of this years ago. I was actually giving an appeal at the end of the service for salvation. And I was in the midst of giving this appeal when all of a sudden this lady started yelling out this word of prophecy. And it absolutely threw me. You know, sort of, whew, what's happening here? It really threw me. It had nothing to do with what was going on. She just, you know, came out with it. And afterwards I said to her, look, when you feel God's got something, you need to be careful at the timing of bringing that to the church. And she said to me, in effect, I can't remember exactly the words, but she said to me, in effect, I couldn't help myself. I had to do it then. You know, I said, actually, you didn't have to do it then. Because you are in control of what's going on. God is not a God of disorder and says, you're a lot of puppets and I'm going to make you do this and that. You are in control of what I'm saying to you and when you bring that. And so it's part of, you know, it says the spirit of the prophet is under the control of the prophet. You are in control of yourself. And if you feel compelled and pushed, God's never actually in a hurry. You know, amazing how God can speak to you 3 months before you actually end up doing it. You know, you ever feel that? God does that, doesn't he? And God's never in a hurry to actually do things. And he won't push you so they actually have to do it. He will encourage you. And the Spirit of God might make your heart bang away in your chest, but you're still in control of what's going to happen and how you speak it out to other people. I remember, this is going off the subject a little bit. I remember years ago when a church back in the 80s, in the charismatic kind of period, was getting a lot of kind of prophecies and words and so forth from the church. And the pastor in the church was just kind of struggling with because they felt that some of them were, the prophecies were spang on and some weren't, and he was wondering, how do I kind of look at this? And so what he did is he sat down with his leaders, and he got them to list all the people in the church who were bringing different words and participating in the congregation. He listed them all down, and then he said, what I want you to do is I want you to actually give the people on this list either a green light, if you feel that they're spot on with what they bring, or a yellow light if what you think they bring is a little bit of God and a lot of them, or the other way around, and a red light if you really feel that they're missing the mark all the time. And he said to me, when they actually did that, they were almost exactly the same in terms of how they felt about the people bringing the different words. And so what they did was, with the people who had the green light, they went to them and said, just wanted to encourage you. You know, we really feel that what you're bringing to the church is relevant and is real and it's from the Lord. Those are the people who had yellows, you know. Sometimes it was them and sometimes it was God, and a bit of a mixture. They just said to them, you need to be a little bit more discerning to hear from God, because sometimes you're bringing it out of your own imagination, and you just need to be a little bit more careful about hearing from God before you bring it. And those with the red light, they said to them, we just want you to stop sharing this in the congregation just now until you hear better from God and you've learnt to hear from God for yourself more. I thought it was an interesting way of actually judging in the whole church about this weighing up of what's from God and what's not from God, and weighing that up and testing that. Now, Paul, in verse 33 to verse 38, Paul raises the issue of whether women are allowed to participate in the gifts of the Spirit and speak in church. Now, the place of women in church has always been a big hot potato for centuries, I guess. Oh, in fact, since dot one, you know. And in some churches today, it's still a very controversial kind of issue. Some of you come from churches where women were not allowed to participate in a Sunday morning service. Let me make some comments on this. This is my take on this. The culture in Paul's day was that women wore a veil or a head covering when they came to church. And they were not allowed to speak in church. That was the culture of the day. You know, the fascinating thing is that when you study the Muslim faith, almost everything that the Muslim faith practices, like head coverings, when they walk into the mosque, they have ablutions, you know, they wash themselves. The kneeling, the fasting, all of those things. Do you know where they got it from? They got it from the early church. The Greek Orthodox Church still practice a lot of those things. We don't know a lot about the Greek Orthodox Church, but they still practice a lot of things that the Muslim faith do. The Muslim faith basically got all that stuff from the early church. They entrenched it in their practices, and they still practice what they started out with. In the church, in the early church, the culture of the day was that women wore a headscarf and they didn't speak in church. That was the culture of the day. And also men and women were segregated. You know, all the guys sat up the front and the women sat on the balcony at the back, or all the women sat on this side and all the guys sat on this side. That was the practice and the culture of the day. I had a little bit of experience of this. I went up to New Guinea some years ago with the New Zealand Baptists. And we went up into the Highlands to the Baptist church up in the Highlands. And they had 2 morning services, one for the Europeans and one for the nationals. And I went to the first service, sat down in the pews and had the service. And at the end of it, I got talking with the guy. And we were chatting away in the service, at the end of the service, and he excused himself and went out. So I just sat there waiting for the second service to happen with all the nationals. And all of a sudden I became aware of the fact that nobody was sitting beside me. There was a circle around me, and no one was sitting beside me, all around me like this. And as I looked around, I realised that all the people on my side were the ladies. I was sitting right in the middle of the ladies' side of the congregation. And I looked across the other side, and all the guys were on the other side. And they were all laughing at me. You know, there's ignorant white guy sitting amongst all the women on this other side here, you know. So I very sheepishly got up and walked across to the guy's side, you know. But the interesting thing was that on the guy's side, about the first quarter of the section, there was a transition taking place. On the first quarter of that guy's side, the more educated nationals were sitting with their wives. And what was happening was that here was this transition from the culture of women on one side and the men on the other side, but the people who were educated were now picking up the Western practice of husbands and wives sitting together. It's a very interesting kind of experience. I remember preaching on this some years ago, and a lady in the congregation came to me and said to me, I was brought up in Burma. My parents were missionaries in Burma. And she said they used to have all the women on one side and all the guys on the other side. And she said all the women, and a lot of the guys as well, but especially the